All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a huge question today. What does it actually mean, and what does it actually cost to be middle class in America as we're looking ahead to 2026? It feels like the goalposts are always moving, right? So we're going to break down the numbers, the pressures, and what this new reality really looks like.
You know, this quote from American Compass just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? For a lot of us, this feels deeply, deeply true. The whole idea of one parent being able to comfortably support the family, own a home, save for the future, it honestly sounds like a story from a totally different time.
So yeah, what happened? That's the billion-dollar question we're digging into. Because this isn't just about inflation, it feels like something much more fundamental has shifted in our economy. So let's follow the data and see exactly where it takes us.
Okay, to really get a grip on what's happening now, we need to talk about a concept that economists are using a lot these days. It's called the K-shaped economy, and it's a really powerful way to picture what so many of us are actually living through. So this is the big idea, a K-shaped economy. You can just forget the old idea of an economic recovery where, a rising tide lifts all boats. The K-shape means that after a big economic shock, some people's finances shoot straight up, while others, they start trending down. It's creating two completely separate financial worlds.
And you can see those two paths right here. On that top arm of the K, you've got higher income households, their spending is still strong, they're buying services, things are looking pretty good. But then there's the bottom arm. That's where middle and lower income families are, and you can see they're really feeling the strain, being forced to cut back. And that strain, it is absolutely showing up in how people feel. A University of Michigan survey found that a staggering 44% of middle-income households said their financial situation was actually worse than it was a year ago. I mean, that is a huge chunk of the country feeling like they are actively falling behind. So, we see the split. We see how people are feeling about it. But what does the squeeze actually look like in dollars and cents? Let's get into the hard data and see just how much the price of the American dream has really changed.
A great way to measure this is with something called the Cost of Thriving Index. It's actually a pretty simple but brilliant metric. It asks how many weeks of work does it take for one person earning a median salary to afford the absolute building blocks of a middle-class life.
Let's set a baseline. Go back to 1985. Back then, it took a single, typical full-time worker just under 40 weeks to cover the costs of housing, healthcare, transportation, food, and college for their family. That was totally doable in a 52-week year, with time to spare. Now, look at this jump. By 2022, that exact same basket of goods and services required nearly 67 weeks of work. Let that sink in for a second. A year's worth of necessities now costs more than a year's worth of work for a typical earner. It is literally mathematically impossible for a single-income family to keep up. And you might be asking, where is all this pressure coming from? Well, this chart tells a huge part of the story. Housing costs have more than tripled, which is a big deal. But just look at healthcare. It has exploded. We're talking more than 10 times the cost. Those two things alone have completely rewritten the rules for family budgets.
This incredible rise in costs isn't just some abstract economic problem, right? It has fundamentally changed the very structure of American society and who even gets to call themselves middle class anymore.
So let's travel back for a second. Thanks to this Pew Research data, we can see that in 1971, the middle class was the clear, undisputed majority in the country, making up 61% of the population. I mean, this was the absolute bedrock of the economy.
Okay. Now fast forward to 2023. The picture could not be more different. The middle class has shrunk to just 51%, so it's barely a majority anymore. And you can see where people went. Both the lower and the upper income tiers have grown. It's that economic split, that K-shape, happening in real time.
And it's not just about how many people are in the middle class, it's also about economic power. Back in 1970, the middle class held a whopping 62% of the nation's household income. By 2022, that share had plummeted to just 43%, while the upper class's share grew to nearly half of all the income in the entire country.
So all of this brings us to a really fascinating question. We've been talking about the numbers, the income brackets, but what does the term middle class actually mean to people? Is it a number on a paycheck, or is it a way of life? Officially, according to Pew Research, this was the income range for a middle-class family of three back in 2022. Now, that is a huge range, and let's be honest, depending on where you live in the country, that money can feel wildly different. But here's the kicker.
An American Compass survey shows that for most of us, middle class isn't really a salary at all. It's about a set of securities. It's the ability to own your own home, have great health insurance, and yeah, even have the choice to support a family on one income. The huge gap between that official salary number and the ability to actually afford this lifestyle, that's where all the frustration is coming from.
And if rising costs weren't enough, there are also new roadblocks to getting those stable jobs, something called degree inflation. Just look at this data. Jobs that used to be a reliable path to the middle class without a college degree, like a production supervisor, now often require one. It's a barrier that shuts out millions of perfectly qualified people. And for the people who do go and get that degree, well, the financial risk is going up. The safety nets for federal student loans are being pulled back, getting rid of really important deferment options for things like losing your job. It's just one more layer of financial uncertainty.
So let's put all these pieces together. What does the road to 2026 actually look like? What is this new middle-class reality that we're all trying to figure out?
I think the big takeaway here is that the old benchmarks, the salary goals, the classic career paths, they just don't apply in the same way anymore. The new middle-class salary isn't really about hitting one specific number. It's about learning to navigate a totally new economic landscape, one where the biggest life goals feel further and further away.
And what's so fascinating is how this changes our behavior as consumers. When those huge goals like buying a house feel almost impossible, we tend to shift our spending towards smaller, more attainable comforts. The steady growth of things like wellness subscription boxes is a perfect example of this. It's a small, recurring way to feel good when those bigger dreams are on hold. And all of this leaves us with one last big question. The data is pretty clear. We're living in a K-shaped economy, and it's splitting us apart financially. So the biggest challenge moving forward isn't just about how you or I can get ahead. It's about how we as a society can build a future that feels prosperous and secure for everyone.